Hey everybody, Jorge Soto here, and thank you for watching Startups Unedited. Today I am joined by Rahul Jain, who is co-founder and CEO at Noble. And we're going to dive in here today, just dig into your story here, because y'all started with one approach around bringing social proof and those sort of things to the website, right? Which is a no-brainer. And you made a successful pivot. Congratulations once again on that pivot. I wanted to dive in to that experience. So like, I guess, at a high level, when did you know, all right, and maybe you can give folks a little context on like kind of what motivated, making that pivot and how you actually executed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me, George. I think when it comes to the pivot, so we pivoted from a word of mouth product where prospects could see which of their friends used a product and ask them for recommendations, to an AI search experience where brands could essentially show up in the LLMs and AI search when prospects were searching for them on Google and ChatGPT. And I think for us, we kind of realized that sales were slowing down. It became incredibly difficult to close new clients. Existing clients, they weren't looking to expand with us. And we also weren't getting the usage that we wanted from individuals or users that would see Noble on the website. I think we were also running into a lot of legal and privacy issues. So the way that Noble worked is that we needed to know who was using the product to be able to show prospects which of their friends or colleagues were users so they could reach out to them. And I kind of felt like it was almost like death by a million cuts, where there was always reasons that a customer or prospect couldn't move forward with it. Or if they did, it was all these like small pilots where it was impossible to realize the value that we were hoping to. And we kind of got to this point over the summer where we were like, we have a few months of runway left. This really isn't working. What else can we do? And we were kind of looking to see what was out there, and AI search just was the hottest topic. And we were kind of thinking at the time, kind of like, well, is there something new that we can do around AI search? And that's kind of how we went from our former product to our new product that we're now live with. But I think ultimately it kind of came to this point of like, we worked really hard for about 2 years on the previous product, but we just weren't seeing the growth that we were hoping to.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely resonates with my experiences and makes total sense. How do you, when you're basically driving the ship forward, right? Or you're driving a tanker with multiple, multiple resources, customers, employees, investors. Like, I mean, this is not just you sitting there with your co-founder going, all right, you know what, we're going to do something different, right? There's a lot of different variables in course correcting, right? How do you go about, like, what's the first call that you make once you and, your co-founding team, like, make that internal decision, like, we're going to go ahead and pursue something new? Is that the board? Like, how do you actually like mobilize this pivot?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it also kind of shows you why it's so hard for big companies to pivot or to do something new, because not only do you realize your current direction may not be working the way you want to, but you can't just scrap it and just move on to something else because you have existing customers that you have to support. You have existing contracts that you have to service. You have team members that have been hired to do certain work. And if there is uncertainty, you don't want to bring that to your team at a whole. And so the way that we did this is we were essentially doing little tests on the side where we had our current product, but then it was essentially me and my co-founder that were like testing little tests to see like, hey, like, would this work? Could we get people to buy it? And we had to have something that people would be willing to try before we could bring that to the rest of the team. And then we needed some level of like traction before we went to our board and our investors to be like, hey, we don't think what we're doing today is working, but we have this other idea that we want to pursue. And even when it came to raising a bit more money from our current investors, they weren't just like, oh, like, we like you guys, we trust you guys, we were working together for 2 years. They were very much on like you have to resell us on this idea. You have to resell us on why now, why this pivot matters, because the last thing that your investors or board want is they don't want like a pivot to nowhere. So they don't want to throw more money at a company that already doesn't have a great cap table and may not get far enough along in the pivot to raise more capital down the road. So it is really difficult to take a team that is already, has products deployed, has customers that you need to service, and also has investors, because those investors also invested in a different idea than you're pivoting to. So it isn't easy to get them on board, or it certainly took work, in our experience.
And how do you do that with customers, right? Because I know you had quite a few customers using the initial product.
Yeah, I think that's just a really tough kind of conversation to have with them, to say, like, when you make the decision, you essentially, what we did is we said, this product, we were hoping it would grow faster than it did. We're just not seeing the results and the traction. And I think a lot of our customers would agree with this, because they were also trying to measure the results that they believe that they would see. And, at some point we just had to say that we're no longer offering this product. We're moving all of our customers in, like, onto this new product. And luckily we were selling to a similar persona. So still marketers, and mostly demand gen marketers. So they still understood the value of where we were moving towards. But for them, it was really a conversation of, here's what we're moving towards. And luckily we were not selling like annual contracts. They were month to month. And so we could essentially cancel them at the end of the month, and they weren't paying for, like, they didn't prepay for any of the contracts. So from like a financial perspective, that was definitely helpful. Whereas if you had like annual or like 2-year contracts, that becomes a much more difficult conversation.
Rahul, just to switch gears a bit, to highlight the founder experience, is there anything that was just profoundly different about the actual founding experience and being that founder that you didn't know beforehand?
Yeah, so luckily this is my second time starting a company. So I started my first company back in 2013. And that's actually how I met my now co-founder, Josh, because we were both starting our first companies back at that time, and we were in the same incubator together in Philadelphia. I think being a founder for the first time, the hardest thing for me was just kind of just the level of uncertainty that you deal with every single day. Like, you don't know how any of the sales calls are going to go. Like, you're building the product, you don't know if the product's going to work. Like, there's so much that happens on a day-to-day basis that you've got to get really good with just embracing uncertainty. Because as a founder, I feel like that's just like one thing you never have. You never have confidence that, like, where you're going to be from a sales perspective, from a revenue perspective, from a product perspective, like, our customer's going to be happy, and everything ultimately falls on your shoulders because you have to deal with it. And I think the hardest thing is just the emotional toll that takes on you. And so the second time around, I think I wanted to make sure before I started my second company, or I tried this again, that I was ready for that emotional burden. And I was much better equipped this time going into it than I was the first time.
Were there any, and by the way, I got to say, like, I've interviewed hundreds of CEOs, startup CEOs over the years, did a documentary years ago on this as well. And one of the questions I asked was how did you actually manage that? Like, you talked about being ready. Like, is there anything that you're doing now that allows you to be prepared for those inevitable emotional ups and downs, and helps you actually be grounded so you can make great decisions?
Yeah, I definitely am not perfect at this. Like, I'm far from perfect. I think there's two things. One, just understanding it going into it, knowing what those days are like, having lived it before, like, and not, being surprised by it. I think it is helpful, just having that expectation. But I think the other part is, like, when I was doing my first company in my 20s, it was my entire life. I didn't have any balance. It was pretty much the company and nothing else. But now that in my mid 30s, married, you have a 3-month-old son.
Congratulations.
Thank you. There's just a lot more going on in my life, and I embrace that, because even if things aren't going great at work, or it's been a rough day, week, month, like, there's more to life than work, and everybody knows that. But I think in my 20s, all I really cared about was work, and I would work just crazy hours, and it really was like all or nothing on just, like, if I was doing good, if the company was doing well. And I think now I kind of embrace other parts of my life. And it always just reminds me that, like, yes, I like my job. It's important to me. I find fulfillment in it, but there's more to me than
Mm.
just work. And I think that has helped me in this chapter of my life.
Yeah, it makes total sense that, that work-life balance kind of thing, and being able to have that perspective, I think is really important, certainly for me. And I've talked a lot about that concept of the identity being so wrapped into or wrapped around the idea of being a successful founder,
Yeah.
right? And I think once you've done it multiple times, you realize that if you're doing it for the title or the ego, boy, get out now, right? Because
Yeah.
that's that's not sustainable, right? The moment reality hits, it'll be difficult to be in it.
Yeah. And it's
And
like, it's so cliche, but it is true that, like, you've got to enjoy the journey as much as the destination. Because if you're just doing this for the exit, oh my gosh, it is so painful and it's so long, and the exit may not come. But
yeah,
if you can do it and you can appreciate the day to day, as hard as it is, but you love the fact that you have the freedom to do this and you can build something, and that's what you enjoy, and you can remind yourself, like, that's why you're doing it. The whole thing is just a different lens to the
yeah,
experience versus just waiting for this great exit to hopefully come one day. And I think that's the mindset I had in my 20s. And when we had to shut down the company, we lost everything. It was, it was awful,
yeah,
because in retrospect, I had this incredible experience in my 20s, working with my best friends, like being surrounded by a team that was awesome, working on a problem that I really cared about. But I was so focused on the results that I didn't really appreciate the journey.
yeah,
So, kind of live and learn.
yeah. I completely empathize and can completely relate to every word
Mhm.
there. I wanted to talk a little bit about go to market, right? So you've
Mhm.
shifted to this new product. Are y'all selling to the same market segments? Like, how do you see your go to market approach or motion change,
Mhm.
or maybe it hasn't?
Yeah, so we kind of sell to different parts of the AI search or SEO market. So we still sell to demand gen marketers who we were selling to for the previous products. So anybody who's in charge of building pipeline for their company. So that's still true. So the relationships I built pre-pivot were still valuable when it came to selling this new AI search
Mm,
product. But that's one segment of the market. We also sell to SEO agencies. And the idea is that these agencies already have contracts and relationships with larger brands that they're managing SEO for. And a big component of how to show up in these LLMs for AI search is getting mentioned in the sources that are being cited for the search prompts they care about. So we essentially power that ability for the SEO agencies that are offering this service to their clients. So that's the second segment. And then there's a third segment where there's already this huge ecosystem around AI search today. So if you think about your visibility tracking tools, so like the Scrunch,
mm,
Otterly's of the world, if you think about your website optimization tools, so the Webflows of the world, the AirOps, and like Adobe's of the world, we're actually trying to partner with all of those companies, where if they're offering their services to their customers, they can now also offer Noble as well. So they can say, like, hey, we do on-site optimization, but now we can also get you mentioned in these third-party
mm.
sources as well. So we're trying to use all that for distribution. So we're kind of building on the relationships we had with demand gen marketers, which are still going direct, but we have these other channels that we're evaluating.
Unbelievable. Are there any particular categories that you are focused on serving right now?
It's a good question. We're really focused on B2B companies now, not because B2C or consumer companies wouldn't be a good fit for this, because they also want to show up in Google search and ChatGPT. We just don't have as many relationships with B2C companies as we do with B2B. So we're starting with a lot of B2B companies, kind of high growth companies. We started with customers like Ramp and Webflow and ZoomInfo and Zendesk, but now we're kind of going out market. And so we're talking to some of the larger enterprises in B2B. But there's not like a particular segment that we're focusing on. We like to say that if you hired somebody for SEO, you're large enough to use Noble. And that's kind of our kind of framework for like how big a company should be, where they probably have budget, and then B, they have somebody that can actually manage and use Noble properly.
Rahul, if you had to give a startup CEO one piece of information or advice right now, and I know that's a lot, so maybe take a quick second to think about it, but whatever comes up to mind like right now, what would that advice be about making this journey sustainable, or just really optimizing your role as a CEO? Because I think all of us that have worn that hat, irrespective of your, whether you're a small, 10-person team or, 1,000 or 10,000, right? Like there's a specific, I think, psychology of being sort of the CEO and everything being on your shoulders, even if that's not the case, even though you have a board, right? And even though you have, fellow co-founders and those sort of things, just being that CEO has this almost like invisible burden that seems to exist. So if you were to give that advice, what would that be?
Yeah, there's so much. I would say kind of two things. One, just take care of yourself. It's really hard. There's a lot of stress. You're trying to do something by definition that's impossible to do. You're trying to start something from scratch. So you're kind of, all the odds are against you. But before it comes to like the business and making it work, just making sure you take care of yourself, whatever that is. If that's just making sure you get enough sleep, making sure that you're able to work out, just kind of those necessities, like just start there. The other thing I would say is don't try to do this alone. And I think this is what I tried to do with my first startup. I tried to be that CEO that always seemed strong, always had the answers, never looked like they were rattled or they were, affected by negative news. That's not at all how I am now. Like I'm very close with my co-founder. We kind of share everything. I don't act like I have all the answers. Yeah. When things are shitty, like we talk through it. I go to him with problems more than I would before. And I don't pretend like I have all the answers. And I think I think having somebody to share all that with, one, you need the right co-founder, you need the right people, the right team behind you. But I think it makes the whole experience so much more enjoyable. And I also think it's impossible if you expect yourself to have all the answers, and if you expect yourself to not be impacted or affected by the ups and downs, because there's a lot more downs than there are ups in this journey.
Awesome. Rahul, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. If folks wanted to follow you on social media, maybe learn more about Noble, what are the best links or URLs to reach you?
Yeah, probably LinkedIn. So I don't even know what my handle is, but if you just search Rahul Jain and Noble, I'll probably show up.
Awesome. Well, have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Cool. Thanks, George.